The morning sun cast long shadows across the kitchen floor as Catherine Williams stirred her tea with trembling fingers. At 78, her hands weren't as steady as they once were, but today the shaking came from something deeper than age. She had made a decision that would change everything for her family, and the weight of it pressed against her chest like a stone. Through the window, she could see her son David tending to the roses in the back garden. He had moved back home 3 years ago after his divorce, bringing his 2 teenage children with him. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, just until he got back on his feet, but Catherine had grown to love having them all under her roof again. The house felt alive with their voices, their laughter, their occasional arguments. But there was one voice that had grown increasingly sharp, increasingly present, and increasingly difficult to bear. Camilla's heels clicked against the hardwood floors as she descended the stairs, already dressed in her perfectly pressed business attire, despite it being only 7 in the morning. David's girlfriend of 2 years had practically moved in 6 months ago, though she maintained her own apartment across town for appearances. Catherine had tried to welcome her, had tried to see what David saw in the polished, ambitious woman who worked in marketing for a prestigious firm. "Good morning, Catherine," Camilla said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used, not quite cold, but certainly not warm. It was the voice of someone performing politeness rather than feeling it. Catherine looked up from her tea. "Good morning, dear. There's fresh coffee if you'd like some." Camilla moved to the coffee maker, her movements precise and efficient. Everything about her was precise and efficient, from her sleek blonde hair that never seemed to have a strand out of place to her designer handbags that cost more than Catherine's monthly pension. She poured her coffee into the travel mug she kept in the kitchen, the one with her company's logo emblazoned on the side. "I've been thinking," Camilla said, leaning against the counter in a casual pose that somehow still looked calculated, "about the living situation here." Catherine's stomach tightened. They'd had this conversation before, in various forms, over the past few months. Camilla had a way of bringing it up when David wasn't around, framing her suggestions as concerns for Catherine's well-being or gentle observations about the family dynamic. "Oh?" Catherine kept her voice neutral, though her fingers tightened around her teacup. "It's just that David is working so hard to rebuild his life, and I worry that living here might be holding him back. You know how it is. A man his age needs his independence, needs to feel like he's providing for his family rather than being provided for." The words stung because there was just enough truth in them to make Catherine doubt herself. She had wondered the same thing sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep. Was she helping David by letting him stay? Or was she enabling him to avoid fully taking responsibility for his new life? "He seems happy here," Catherine said quietly. "The children love having the extra space, and Emma especially has grown so close to me since the divorce." Camilla's smile was sharp. "Of course they're comfortable here. Who wouldn't be? But comfort isn't always what's best for growth, is it?" Before Catherine could respond, the back door opened, and David came in, brushing dirt from his hands. At 45, he still had the easy smile that had charmed teachers and girlfriends throughout his youth, though there were lines around his eyes now that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. "Morning, Mum," he said, kissing Catherine's cheek. "Morning, Cam." He moved to Camilla and wrapped his arms around her waist, nuzzling her neck in a gesture that was both affectionate and slightly performative, as if he needed to demonstrate their connection. "I was just telling your mother how lovely the garden looks," Camilla said smoothly, though she had said no such thing. "You have such a talent for growing things." David beamed at the praise, and Catherine felt a familiar pang of sadness. Her son was a good man, but the divorce had shaken his confidence in ways that were still healing. He seemed to need constant reassurance now, especially from Camilla, and she had learned exactly how to provide it. "Actually," Camilla continued, I was wondering if we might all sit down and talk about the future sometime soon. I have some ideas that might benefit everyone." Catherine saw the flicker of uncertainty that crossed David's face. He was caught between two women he cared about, and she could see the stress it caused him. It wasn't fair to put him in that position, she realized. None of this was fair to any of them. The sound of feet pounding down the stairs announced the arrival of Emma and Jake, David's 15- and 17-year-old children. Emma bounced into the kitchen with the energy that only teenagers seemed to possess before noon, while Jake slouched behind her, still half asleep. "Gran, are you making your famous pancakes today?" Emma asked hopefully, settling into her usual chair at the kitchen table. She had Catherine's dark hair and David's easy smile, and she had been the light of Catherine's life since moving in. "If you'd like them, sweetheart," Catherine said, already moving toward the pantry. Cooking for her family was one of the simple pleasures that made everything else bearable. "Actually," Camilla interjected, "I was thinking we might try that new health food place downtown. They have an excellent quinoa bowl that would be much better for growing teenagers than all that sugar and refined flour." Emma's face fell slightly, though she tried to hide it. Jake just shrugged. At 17, he had learned to roll with whatever the adults decided, though Catherine noticed he never seemed as comfortable around Camilla as he had been before she became a regular fixture in their lives. "The kids love Gran's pancakes," David said mildly, but Catherine could hear the careful neutrality in his voice. He was trying not to take sides. "Of course they do," Camilla said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Children always love treats, but I'm thinking about their long-term health, their energy levels for school, their development of good eating habits." Catherine felt something crack inside her chest. It wasn't just about the pancakes, of course. It was about everything. The way Camilla had gradually begun inserting herself into every family decision, always with reasonable explanations, always with David's and the children's best interests at heart. The way she had started rearranging things in the house, just to make them more efficient. The way she spoke about Catherine's mothering and grandmothering, as if it were well-intentioned but ultimately harmful. "I'll make the pancakes," Catherine said firmly. "It's Sunday morning and we're a family. Families have traditions." For just a moment, Camilla's mask slipped, and Catherine saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual pleasant smile. "Of course," she said. "I didn't mean to overstep. I just care so much about David and the children. Sometimes I get carried away." But Catherine had seen that look, and she recognized it for what it was. This wasn't about health food or independence or any of the reasonable-sounding explanations Camilla always provided. This was about control. This was about establishing who really ran this family, and it wasn't going to be Catherine. As she mixed the pancake batter, Catherine made her decision. She had been thinking about it for weeks, turning it over in her mind like a stone in her pocket. The letter from her solicitor lay upstairs in her bedroom drawer, the one about updating her will and making arrangements for her estate. She had put off dealing with it, but suddenly it seemed urgent. The pancakes sizzled in the pan, filling the kitchen with their warm, familiar smell. Emma chattered about her plans for the day, something about meeting friends at the cinema. Jake mumbled about needing new football boots. David read bits of news from his phone aloud, the way he always did on Sunday mornings. And Camilla sat at the table, smiling and nodding and occasionally offering suggestions that somehow managed to undermine whatever anyone else had said. Catherine flipped the pancakes and thought about power, about how it could be subtle and gradual, like water wearing away stone, about how someone could slowly take over a family without anyone quite realizing what was happening until it was too late. But she also thought about love, about the fierce, protective love she felt for her son and grandchildren, about how sometimes loving someone meant making hard choices, even if those choices hurt. The decision crystallized in her mind as she stacked the golden pancakes on a plate. She would call her solicitor tomorrow morning. She would make the arrangements she had been putting off, and she would do something that would ensure her family's future, even if it meant sacrificing her present happiness. "Breakfast is ready," she announced, setting the plate in the center of the table. Emma cheered and reached for the syrup. Jake actually smiled, the first genuine smile Catherine had seen from him all week. David squeezed her shoulder affectionately. "These smell amazing, Mum," he said. "Just like when I was a kid." Camilla took a small portion and added fresh fruit from the bowl on the counter, making a point of eating healthily even as she participated in the family tradition. It was a small gesture, but Catherine understood its meaning. Camilla would go along with things when she had to, but she would always make it clear that she had better ideas. After breakfast, the children disappeared to their rooms, and David went back to the garden. Camilla lingered in the kitchen, helping Catherine clean up in a way that felt more like supervision than assistance. "You know," she said as she loaded the dishwasher with precisely aligned plates, "I've been thinking about David's career prospects. There are some really exciting opportunities opening up in London, positions that would be perfect for someone with his background." Catherine's hands stilled on the dish towel. "London is quite far from here." "Exactly," Camilla said brightly. "It would be a fresh start, a chance for him to really build something substantial. And the schools there are excellent. Much better opportunities for Emma and Jake than they'd have in a small town like this." "They're settled here," Catherine said carefully. "They've been through enough upheaval with the divorce." Camilla's expression grew sympathetic, but there was something calculating behind it. "I know change is hard, especially at your age, but sometimes we have to think about what's best for the younger generation, even if it's difficult for us personally." The casual dismissal of Catherine's feelings, dressed up as concern for others, was the final straw. Catherine set down her dish towel and turned to face Camilla directly. "And what about what I want?" she asked quietly. "What about my relationship with my grandchildren, with my son?" For a moment, Camilla's mask slipped again. "Well, naturally you'd want to see them settled and successful, even if it meant some sacrifice on your part. That's what grandmothers do, isn't it? Put their families first?" The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that Catherine almost admired it. Camilla had managed to frame Catherine's desire to keep her family close as selfishness, while positioning her own desire to remove them as selflessness. "Yes," Catherine said slowly, "that is what grandmothers do." But as she said it, she wasn't thinking about letting them go. She was thinking about her decision, about the phone call she would make tomorrow, about the arrangements that would ensure her family's security long after she was gone. If Camilla wanted to play games about who really cared about this family's welfare, Catherine was prepared to play. But she would play to win, and she would play for keeps. The rest of the day passed quietly. David worked in the garden, the children did homework and watched television, and Camilla made phone calls about work projects in her perfectly modulated professional voice. Catherine sat in her favorite chair in the living room, ostensibly reading a book but actually watching her family and thinking about the future. She watched Emma curl up on the sofa next to Jake to watch a movie, the way they had when they were smaller and their parents were still together. She watched David come in from the garden with dirt under his fingernails and satisfaction in his eyes, the way he had when he was a boy helping her plant vegetables. She watched Camilla orchestrate subtle improvements to their afternoon, suggesting better snacks, more educational programming, more productive uses of time, and she made her plans. That evening, after dinner, Catherine excused herself early and went to her room. She pulled out the letter from her solicitor and read it again carefully. Then she took out a pad of paper and began making notes, thinking through every angle, every possibility. She was 78 years old, and she had learned a few things about patience and strategy in her time. She had raised 3 children, buried a husband, survived cancer, and built a life of quiet dignity and gentle strength. If Camilla thought she could simply maneuver an old woman out of her own family, she was about to learn otherwise. Catherine wrote until nearly midnight, planning not just her will but her entire strategy. By the time she turned out her light, she had a clear vision of exactly what needed to be done. Downstairs, she could hear Camilla's voice carrying from David's room, the tone urgent and persuasive, though she couldn't make out the words. Whatever future Camilla was painting for him, Catherine was certain it didn't include much room for an aging mother-in-law, but Catherine had plans of her own now, and she fell asleep with a small, determined smile on her face. The battle for her family's future was just beginning, and Catherine Williams had no intention of going quietly. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Catherine feel more alive than she had in months. She had slept better than she had in weeks, her mind finally at peace now that she had made her decision. By 8 o'clock, she was dressed and ready, sitting at the kitchen table with her phone and the list she had made the night before. The house was quiet. David had left early for work, Camilla had gone to her office, and the children had caught their usual bus to school. For the first time in months, Catherine had the house entirely to herself, and the silence felt like a gift. Her first call was to Margaret Thornfield, her solicitor of 20 years. Margaret had handled Catherine's affairs since her husband's death, and she was one of the few people who truly understood Catherine's financial situation. What most people didn't realize was that Catherine Williams was considerably wealthier than her modest lifestyle suggested. "Catherine, how lovely to hear from you," Margaret's warm voice came through the phone. "I was just thinking about your letter regarding your will. Have you had time to consider the updates we discussed?" "I have indeed," Catherine said. "In fact, I'd like to schedule an appointment as soon as possible. There are some significant changes I want to make." They arranged to meet that afternoon. Catherine's next call was to Dr. Reynolds, her physician for the past 15 years. She needed a complete health assessment, something official and recent that would demonstrate her mental competency. She had a feeling she was going to need that documentation sooner rather than later. Her third call was to James Morrison, David's oldest friend and a successful estate agent. James had always been fond of Catherine, and she trusted him to be discreet about what she was planning. "Mrs. Williams, what a pleasant surprise. How are you? How's David settling in?" "We're all doing well, James. Actually, I'm calling because I need some advice about property values in the area. Hypothetically speaking, of course." "Of course," James said, though she could hear the curiosity in his voice. "What kind of property?" "My house. A 4-bedroom Victorian on Maple Street. I'm not planning to sell immediately, you understand, but I'd like to know what it might be worth if circumstances changed." James was quiet for a moment. Catherine's house was one of the largest and most well-maintained properties in their small town. The location was premium, the garden was spectacular, and the interior had been lovingly cared for over decades. "Well, without seeing the current condition, I'd estimate somewhere in the range of $400,000 to $500,000, possibly more depending on the market. It's a beautiful property, Mrs. Williams. May I ask what's prompting the inquiry?" "Just planning ahead," Catherine said smoothly. "At my age, it's important to understand all of one's options." By noon, Catherine had made all her appointments and had a clear schedule for the week ahead. She also had the beginning of a plan that would ensure her family's security while making it very difficult for anyone to manipulate them for financial gain. She was making lunch when Camilla's car pulled into the driveway unexpectedly. Through the window, Catherine watched her get out of her sleek silver sedan, talking animatedly on her phone. Her body language was agitated, and she was gesturing more than usual as she spoke. "No, that's not what we discussed," Camilla was saying as she came through the back door, still holding the phone to her ear. "The timeline needs to be moved up if we're going to make this work." She paused when she saw Catherine in the kitchen. holding up a finger in a gesture that was supposed to indicate she'd be just a moment, but somehow came across as dismissive. "Let me call you back," Camilla said into the phone. "Something's come up." Catherine continued making her sandwich, spreading butter on the bread with careful attention to detail. "You're home early, dear." "Client meeting was canceled," Camilla said, though something in her tone suggested that wasn't quite the truth. "I thought I'd take the opportunity to come home and spend some time with you. We don't get many chances to talk, just the two of us." Catherine's antennae went up immediately. In the 2 years she'd known Camilla, the other woman had never sought out her company for casual conversation. If Camilla wanted to talk to her alone, it was because she wanted something. "That's thoughtful of you," Catherine said. "Would you like some tea?" "That would be lovely." As Catherine put the kettle on, she could feel Camilla watching her, studying her in a way that made her skin prickle. It reminded her of the way her late husband had watched birds when he was hunting, patient and calculating, and waiting for exactly the right moment to strike. "You know," Camilla said, settling at the kitchen table in the same chair she'd occupied that morning, "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. About the future." "Oh?" "I hope I didn't come across as pushy. I know how much this family means to you, how much you love David and the children." The words were right, but there was something underneath them that felt dangerous. Catherine poured the hot water over the tea bags and carried the cups to the table, buying herself time to think. "Of course I love them. They're my family." "Exactly," Camilla said, leaning forward slightly. "And because you love them, I know you want what's best for them, even if it's not what's easiest for you personally." There it was again, that subtle manipulation that made Catherine's choices seem selfish if they didn't align with what Camilla wanted. "I've always tried to do right by my family," Catherine said carefully. Camilla nodded enthusiastically. "I can see that. You've given them a safe place to land during a difficult time, and that's been wonderful. But I wonder if you've considered that they might be getting too comfortable, too dependent." Catherine sipped her tea and said nothing, letting Camilla fill the silence. "David is such a capable man, but I worry that he's not reaching his full potential while he's here. And the children, well, they're at such important ages for building independence and resilience." "They seem happy here." "Oh, they are," Camilla agreed quickly. "That's part of the problem. Sometimes happiness in the short term can prevent the kind of growth that leads to real success and fulfillment." Catherine set down her teacup with deliberate care. "What exactly are you suggesting, Camilla?" For a moment, Camilla's mask slipped, and Catherine saw something calculating and cold in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by an expression of gentle concern. "I think it might be time to encourage them to take the next step. David has been talking about that position in London, and I think it could be exactly what he needs to rebuild his confidence and his career. London is 300 miles away. I know it seems far, but think about the opportunities. David could triple his salary, the children would have access to some of the best schools in the country, and you would have the satisfaction of knowing you helped them achieve their dreams." "And what about me?" Catherine asked quietly. "What would I have?" Camilla's smile was sympathetic, but firm. "You'd have peace of mind, knowing they were all thriving, and you'd have your freedom back, the chance to enjoy your retirement without the responsibility of caring for a house full of people." The careful way she said it made Catherine realize this wasn't a spontaneous conversation. This was a planned presentation, and Camilla had thought through every angle, every possible objection. "I see," Catherine said. "And I suppose you've discussed this with David?" "We've talked about it generally," Camilla admitted. "He's torn, of course. He feels a responsibility to you, especially after everything you've done for him. But I can see how much he wants this opportunity. He's just afraid of disappointing you." The manipulation was masterful. Camilla had positioned herself as the one who truly understood David's desires while casting Catherine as the obstacle preventing him from achieving them. If Catherine objected, she would be the selfish mother holding her son back. If she agreed, she would lose her family. "That's a lot to think about," Catherine said finally. "Of course it is. I know this isn't easy." Camilla reached across the table and patted Catherine's hand in a gesture that was probably meant to be comforting but felt patronizing. "But I really believe this could be the best thing for everyone." Catherine looked down at Camilla's hand on hers, noting the expensive manicure, the designer watch, the engagement ring that David had bought with money he didn't really have because he'd felt pressured to keep up with Camilla's lifestyle expectations. "You know," Catherine said slowly, "you're right that I want what's best for my family. I've spent my whole life thinking about their welfare, their security, their happiness." Camilla nodded encouragingly. "In fact," Catherine continued, "I've been doing some planning along those lines myself, making sure their future is secure, regardless of what happens to me." Something in her tone made Camilla's expression sharpen slightly. "What kind of planning?" "Oh, just the sorts of things people my age think about. Wills, estates, that sort of thing." Camilla tried to keep her expression neutral, but Catherine caught the flicker of interest in her eyes. "That's very responsible of you." "I think so. I've been quite fortunate over the years, you know. My late husband was an excellent investor, and I've been very careful with money. It's amazing how much you can accumulate when you live modestly." Catherine could practically see the gears turning in Camilla's head. The other woman was clearly trying to calculate exactly how much money might be involved and how it might affect her plans. "I'm sure David appreciates your thoughtfulness," Camilla said carefully. "Well, that's the thing," Catherine said, settling back in her chair as if she were settling in for a long, comfortable chat. "I've been thinking about the most fair way to handle things. David isn't my only child, of course. I have my daughter Sarah in Australia and my son Michael in Canada. They both have families of their own." Camilla's smile became slightly fixed. "Of course. And then there are the grandchildren to consider. Emma and Jake, obviously, but also Sarah's 3 children and Michael's 2. That's quite a few people to think about." "I'm sure you'll figure out what's fair," Camilla said, though her voice had lost some of its earlier warmth. Catherine nodded seriously. "I hope so. It's such a responsibility, isn't it? Making sure that everyone is treated equally, that no one feels favored or forgotten." She could see Camilla processing this information, probably realizing that if Catherine divided her estate equally among multiple children and grandchildren, David's portion would be much smaller than she had anticipated. "Of course," Catherine continued thoughtfully, "there are other factors to consider as well. I've always believed that people who truly love my family, who are committed to their welfare above their own interests, should be supported, and people who might not have those pure motivations." She let the sentence trail off, but her meaning was clear. Camilla's smile was becoming increasingly strained. "I'm sure anyone who truly knows David and the children would want what's best for them." "Oh, I hope so," Catherine said innocently. "Though it can be difficult to tell sometimes. Can't it? People can be very good at saying the right things while having entirely different motivations." The silence stretched between them, and Catherine could see Camilla struggling to figure out how to respond. She had come here expecting to manipulate a lonely old woman into giving up her family. Instead, she was being reminded that the lonely old woman might have considerably more power than she had realized. "Well," Camilla said finally, standing up with forced brightness, "I should get back to work. Thank you for the tea and the chat. It's always so helpful to understand different perspectives." "Any time, dear," Catherine said pleasantly. "I do so enjoy our talks." After Camilla left, Catherine sat at the kitchen table for a long time, thinking. The conversation had confirmed her suspicions about Camilla's true motivations, but it had also revealed something else. Camilla was more calculating than Catherine had realized, and she was clearly operating on multiple levels. The phone call Camilla had been having when she arrived, the sudden appearance at home during a workday, the carefully prepared presentation about David's future, none of it was coincidental. Camilla was accelerating her timeline, and that suggested she felt some kind of pressure or urgency. Catherine pulled out her notebook and added to her growing list of things to investigate and people to call. If Camilla was planning something, Catherine needed to understand exactly what it was and how to counter it. Her appointment with Margaret Thornfield couldn't come soon enough. That afternoon, Catherine drove to Margaret's office in the center of town. The drive gave her time to think through exactly what she wanted to accomplish and how she wanted to structure her requests. Margaret Thornfield was a woman in her early 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of professional competence that came from decades of handling other people's most important decisions. She had guided Catherine through the complex process of settling her husband's estate, and Catherine trusted her judgment completely. "So," Margaret said, settling behind her desk with Catherine's file spread out before her, "what changes are you thinking about making?" Catherine had spent the morning organizing her thoughts, and she presented her requests with the clarity of someone who had thought through every angle. "I want to create a trust structure that will provide for David and the children, but with specific conditions that protect them from being manipulated or taken advantage of." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "That's quite specific. Are there particular concerns I should know about?" Catherine explained the situation with Camilla carefully and thoroughly. She didn't exaggerate or editorializing, just laid out the facts and her observations about the patterns she had noticed. "I see," Margaret said when Catherine finished. "And you're concerned that this woman might be influencing David's decisions for financial rather than emotional reasons?" "I'm concerned that she's trying to isolate him from his family and his support system while positioning herself as his primary advisor and beneficiary." Margaret nodded slowly. "It's not uncommon, unfortunately. People in vulnerable positions after major life changes like divorce can be particularly susceptible to this kind of manipulation. What can I do to protect them?" Margaret pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. "There are several options. We could structure a trust that provides income and security, but prevents anyone from accessing the principal without multiple approvals. We could include provisions that require family counseling or mediation before major decisions. We could even include what's called a predator clause that reduces or eliminates inheritance for anyone who tries to isolate beneficiaries from their families." Catherine felt a surge of hope. "Tell me more about that last one." For the next 2 hours, they worked through the details of a comprehensive estate plan that would protect Catherine's family while making it very difficult for anyone to manipulate them for financial gain. It was complex and sophisticated, but it was also ironclad. "This will take some time to draft properly," Margaret warned, "and I'll need to verify that all the provisions we're discussing are legally enforceable." "How long?" 2 weeks, possibly 3. Catherine nodded. "And in the meantime, is there anything I can do to protect the current situation?" Margaret considered this. "I'd recommend documenting everything. Keep records of conversations, decisions, any pressure that's being applied. If this escalates, having that documentation could be crucial." Catherine left Margaret's office feeling more optimistic than she had in months. For the first time since Camilla had entered their lives, she felt like she had a real strategy for protecting her family. But as she drove home, she also felt a growing sense of urgency. Camilla's behavior that morning suggested she was moving quickly towards something, and Catherine had a feeling that whatever it was going to happen soon. She needed to be ready. The confrontation Catherine had been expecting came sooner than she had anticipated. It was Thursday evening, exactly 3 days after her conversation with Camilla in the kitchen, and the family was gathering for dinner when David made his announcement. I have some news, he said, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone who had rehearsed what he was about to say. I've been offered a position in London, senior marketing director at a firm that specializes in international development projects. Emma looked up from her plate, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. London? Like London, England? That's wonderful, sweetheart, Catherine said, though her heart was sinking. Tell us about it. David glanced at Camilla, who nodded encouragingly from her seat beside him. It's everything I've been working toward, really. The salary is more than double what I'm making now, and the opportunities for advancement are incredible. When would you start? Jake asked. At 17, he was old enough to understand the implications of what his father was saying. That's the thing, David said, his enthusiasm dimming slightly. They want someone to start as soon as possible. The position became available unexpectedly, and they're looking for someone who can hit the ground running. Catherine looked across the table at Camilla, who was watching the family's reactions with an expression of carefully modulated sympathy. There was something triumphant in her eyes, though, something that suggested this wasn't quite the surprise she was pretending it to be. How soon? Catherine asked quietly. David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. 2 weeks. I know it's sudden, and I know it means a lot of changes for everyone. 2 weeks? Emma's voice was small and shocked. But what about school? What about my friends? There are excellent schools in London, Camilla said gently. Much better opportunities than you'd have here, actually. And at your age, you'll make new friends easily. But I don't want new friends, Emma said, tears starting to form in her eyes. I like my friends here. I like my school. I like living with Gran. Catherine's heart broke at the pain in her granddaughter's voice, but she also felt a surge of hope. Emma's honest reaction was exactly what she had been hoping for. It showed that the children didn't want this move any more than she did. Change is hard, David said, reaching over to squeeze Emma's hand. But sometimes we have to be brave and take chances if we want to build a better future. Better for who? Jake asked. His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it that made everyone at the table look at him. I mean, better how? We're happy here. We're doing well in school. We have friends, we have Gran, we have a home. What exactly is better about leaving all that behind? Catherine could see David struggling with the question. She could also see Camilla preparing to answer for him, her mouth opening with what Catherine was sure would be a perfectly reasonable explanation about opportunities and growth and building character. That's a fair question, Jake, Catherine said before Camilla could speak. David, what draws you to this particular opportunity? What makes it worth uprooting the children when they're settled and happy? David looked around the table, and Catherine could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Whatever script he had prepared, his family's reactions weren't following it. I just think, he said slowly, that I need to prove to myself that I can provide for my family properly, that I can build something substantial. You are providing for your family, Catherine said gently. You have a good job here. The children are thriving. You're all together. What more do you need to prove? It's not about what he needs to prove, Camilla interjected smoothly. It's about reaching his full potential. David is incredibly talented, and he deserves opportunities that match his abilities. Catherine looked at Camilla steadily. And you don't think he can find those opportunities here? Not like this, Camilla said. London is one of the world's major financial centers. The networking opportunities alone are worth the move. I see, Catherine said. And have you been looking for positions in London long? There was a slight pause before David answered. Camilla brought it to my attention a few weeks ago. She has contacts in the industry. How fortunate, Catherine said. And this position just happened to become available right when you needed it? Something in her tone made David look at her more carefully. Mom, is everything all right? You seem I don't know. Suspicious? Catherine considered her words carefully. She had hoped to have more time to implement her plans before this moment came, but circumstances were forcing her hand. I'm not suspicious, darling. I'm concerned. In my experience, when major life changes happen very quickly, with a lot of pressure to decide immediately, it's worth taking time to think through all the implications. What kind of implications? Camilla asked, her voice sharp. Catherine looked around the table at her family. Emma was still fighting tears. Jake looked confused and angry. David looked torn between excitement and guilt. And Camilla looked like a woman whose carefully laid plans were being questioned. Well, Catherine said slowly, there are financial implications for one thing. Moving is expensive, especially international moving, and London is one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in. The salary increase more than covers that, Camilla said quickly. Does it? Have you done the calculations? London housing costs, international school fees, the expense of starting over in a new country? Catherine could see David's enthusiasm wavering as he considered these practical details. And then there are the emotional implications, Catherine continued. Emma and Jake would be leaving behind everything they've known during an already difficult time in their lives. They'd be isolated from their extended family, from the support system they've built here. They'd adapt, Camilla said, but her voice was becoming strained. Children are resilient. Some are, Catherine agreed. Others struggle with major changes, especially when they're dealing with the aftermath of their parents' divorce. She turned to David directly. Sweetheart, I know you want to provide for your children and build a successful career, but I wonder if you've considered that what they need most right now isn't more money or bigger opportunities. It might just be stability and family. David was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. But this is such an incredible opportunity, Mom. If I pass it up, I might not get another chance like this. Why? Catherine asked simply. You're a talented, experienced professional. Why would this be your only chance? Because opportunities like this don't come along very often, Camilla said, her patience clearly wearing thin. David needs to think about his long-term career trajectory, not just what's comfortable in the moment. Catherine smiled pleasantly at Camilla. You know, dear, you seem very invested in David's career decisions. I'm curious, what's in this for you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Camilla's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly, and Catherine saw anger flash in her eyes. I care about David, Camilla said. I want to see him succeed. Of course you do, Catherine said. And I'm sure it's just a coincidence that this wonderful opportunity would also remove him and the children from their current support system and make them entirely dependent on you for guidance and companionship in a new country. Mum, David said, his voice warning. That's not fair, isn't it? Catherine asked. David, think about the timing of all this. You've been settled here for 3 years, building a life for yourself and the children. You've been happy. They've been happy. And suddenly, out of nowhere, there's an urgent opportunity that requires you to uproot everything immediately. Doesn't that seem convenient? Convenient for who? Camilla demanded. Catherine looked at her steadily. For someone who wants to isolate a vulnerable man and his children from their family so she can have complete control over their lives and their future. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma and Jake stared at their grandmother with wide eyes, shocked by her directness. David looked stunned, and Camilla looked furious. How dare you? Camilla said, her voice shaking with anger. How dare you accuse me of trying to manipulate David? I love him. I want what's best for him and his family. Do you? Catherine asked calmly. Or do you want what's best for you? Mum, stop, David said. This isn't helping anyone. Catherine turned to her son, her expression gentle but firm. David, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about the answer. Since Camilla has been in your life, has she encouraged your relationship with your children? Has she supported your connection to your family? Has she made your life easier or more complicated? David opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. Catherine could see him thinking, really thinking, probably for the first time in months. She's been supportive, he said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. Has she? Catherine asked. Or has she been critical of the way you parent, the way I parent, the way we run this household? Has she suggested that your children would be better off with different schools, different friends, different influences? She's just trying to help, David said, but he was looking at Camilla with uncertainty now. David, Emma said suddenly, her voice small but clear. Can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Do you really want to move to London? Or do you just think you should want to? The question was so simple, so honest, that it cut through all of Camilla's sophisticated arguments and careful manipulations. David stared at his daughter, and Catherine could see the exact moment when he realized he didn't have a good answer. He started, then stopped. I think it would be a good opportunity for all of us. That's not what I asked, Emma said. I asked if you want to, if you're excited about it, if it feels right to you. David was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know. I've been thinking about what I should want instead of what I do want. And what do you want? Catherine asked gently. David looked around the table at his family, then at the kitchen where they'd shared so many meals, then out the window at the garden he'd been tending. I want my children to be happy, he said slowly. I want to be close to the people I love. I want to feel like I'm enough, just as I am, without having to prove anything to anyone. You are enough, Catherine said firmly. You're a wonderful father and a good man. You don't need to move across the world to prove that. But what about my career? David asked. What about providing for Emma and Jake? You have a good job here, Catherine said. You're providing for them beautifully, and more importantly, you're giving them something money can't buy. A stable, loving family environment. Camilla had been quiet during this exchange, but Catherine could see her calculating, looking for a way to regain control of the situation. This is exactly what I was talking about, Camilla said suddenly. This is why David needs to build independence. He's a grown man, but he's being treated like a child who can't make his own decisions. No one is treating him like a child, Catherine said. We are having a family discussion about a decision that affects all of us. But it's not your decision to make, Camilla said, her voice rising. It's David's decision. And if he chooses to take this opportunity, you should be supporting him instead of trying to guilt him into staying. Catherine stood up from the table, moving to the kitchen counter where she had left a folder earlier that day. Inside was a copy of the preliminary trust documents Margaret had drawn up, along with several other papers she had prepared. You're absolutely right, Camilla, she said, returning to the table with the folder. It is David's decision, but I think he should make it with full information about what's at stake. She opened the folder and pulled out the first document. David, I've been working with Margaret Thornfield to update my estate planning. I wanted you to understand how your decisions might affect not just your immediate future, but your children's long-term security. David looked confused. Mum, what does your will have to do with my job? Catherine glanced at Camilla, who had gone very still. Well, as you know, your father and I were quite careful with money over the years. The house alone is worth nearly £500,000, and there are other assets as well. She could see Camilla's eyes widen slightly at the mention of specific amounts. I've been thinking about the best way to ensure that money is used to benefit the people who truly love this family, Catherine continued. And Margaret has helped me structure a trust that will provide for you and the children, but only under certain conditions." "What kind of conditions?" David asked. Catherine pulled out another document. "The trust provides income and support for family members who maintain close relationships with each other. It ensures that Emma and Jake will have money for university, for houses, for their own children's education, but it also includes provisions designed to protect against anyone who might try to isolate family members or manipulate financial decisions." Camilla's face had gone pale. "What exactly does that mean?" Catherine smiled pleasantly. "It means that if any beneficiary is pressured to cut ties with their family, or if they make major life decisions that seem designed to benefit someone outside the family at the family's expense, their access to the trust can be limited or eliminated entirely." "That's—" Camilla started, then seemed to realize she was about to object to provisions designed to protect the family from exactly what she had been doing. "It's quite comprehensive," Catherine agreed. "For instance, if David were to move to London, cutting off his children's relationship with their grandmother and extended family here, the trust would consider that a warning sign, especially if that move seemed to primarily benefit someone who wasn't actually a family member." David was staring at the documents. "Mum, I had no idea you'd been thinking about any of this." "I think about your future all the time, darling. It's what mothers do." Catherine turned to the last document in the folder. "I've also been in touch with James Morrison about property values. Did you know that this house could easily provide enough money to buy you a lovely home here in town, with enough left over to invest for the children's future?" "You'd sell the house?" David asked, shocked. "If it meant keeping my family together and secure, I'd sell anything," Catherine said simply. "The house is just a building. Family is everything." She looked directly at Camilla. Of course, someone who truly cared about this family's welfare would be delighted to know that they had such security available to them right here, without having to uproot their entire lives. Camilla stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I think I need some air," she said tightly. After she left, the kitchen was quiet, except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Emma and Jake looked at their grandmother with something approaching awe. "Gran," Emma said finally, "that was amazing." Catherine smiled at her granddaughter. "Sometimes, sweetheart, you have to fight for the people you love." David was still staring at the papers. "Mum, I don't know what to say. I didn't realize— I never thought about any of this from your perspective." "You don't need to say anything," Catherine said. "You just need to make the decision that feels right to you, knowing that your family will be here to support you no matter what you choose." "But what if I'm making a mistake?" David asked. "What if I'm giving up something important?" "Then you'll figure it out," Catherine said. "That's what families do. We help each other through mistakes. But David, running away from a life you actually love isn't a mistake you can easily undo." Jake spoke up for the first time since Camilla had left. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you think about being happy, what do you see?" David considered the question seriously. "I see you and Emma laughing. I see Sunday morning pancakes with Gran. I see working in the garden and feeling proud of what I've accomplished. I see having dinner with people who love me no matter what." "And do any of those things require moving to London?" David laughed. A real laugh for the first time in weeks. "No, they don't." "Then maybe," Jake said quietly. "You already have everything you need." Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. Her grandson was wise beyond his years, and he had just articulated exactly what she had been hoping David would realize. "You know what?" David said, standing up and walking to the window. Outside, they could see Camilla pacing in the garden, talking intensely on her phone. "I think I need to have a conversation with Camilla." "Are you sure?" Catherine asked. David nodded. "I'm sure. For the first time in months, I'm completely sure." He headed toward the back door, then stopped and turned back to his family. "Thank you," he said simply. "All of you, for reminding me what actually matters." As David went outside to face his future, Catherine sat back down at the kitchen table with her grandchildren. Emma reached over and squeezed her hand. "Gran, are you really going to leave us the house and all that money?" Catherine smiled. "Sweetheart, I'm going to make sure you and your brother and your father are taken care of for the rest of your lives. But more importantly, I'm going to make sure you stay a family." Through the window, they could see David and Camilla in intense conversation. Camilla's body language was agitated, her hands moving in sharp gestures. David looked calm, but determined. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes. When it was over, Camilla walked to her car without looking back at the house. David stood in the garden for a long time, watching her drive away. When he finally came back inside, his face was sad but peaceful. "How did it go?" Catherine asked. "She's not happy," David said. "She thinks I'm making a huge mistake, throwing away my future, letting my family hold me back from my potential." "And what do you think?" David looked around the kitchen, at the family photos on the refrigerator, at the evidence of the life they had built together. "I think she was probably right about one thing," he said. "I was letting my family hold me back." Catherine's heart sank. "I was letting fear of disappointing you hold me back from telling Camilla that this is where I belong," David continued. "I should have been clearer months ago about what I really wanted." Relief flooded through Catherine. "And what do you really want?" "I want to stay here," David said simply. "I want to raise my children near their grandmother who loves them. I want to tend a garden and come home to family dinners and Sunday morning pancakes. I want to build a life that's about love instead of achievement." Emma cheered and threw her arms around her father. Jake smiled, the first genuine smile Catherine had seen from him in weeks. "Are you sure?" Catherine asked. "There will be other opportunities, other relationships. I don't want you to feel trapped here." David sat down at the table and took his mother's hands in his. "Mom, I've been trapped for the past year, but not by you. I've been trapped by the idea that I had to be someone different, someone more successful, someone more impressive. Being here with you and the kids, that's not a trap, that's freedom." 6 months later, Catherine sat in the same kitchen chair, watching her son work in the garden while Emma and Jake did homework at the table. David had taken a promotion at his local job and was happier than she had seen him since before his divorce. Margaret Thornfield had finalized all the estate planning, ensuring that Catherine's family would be secure for generations to come. But more importantly, they were together, and they were choosing each other every day. Camilla had moved to London herself, taking a position with the same firm that had offered David the job. Catherine suspected that had always been the plan, that the job offer had been more about giving Camilla a reason to convince David to move than about advancing his career. But David was building his own future now, one that was based on love and family rather than ambition and image. And Catherine had learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family isn't money or opportunities, but the wisdom to recognize what they already have. As the sun set over the garden David had made beautiful, Catherine felt a deep sense of peace. She had fought for her family and she had won, not because she had more power or money than Camilla, but because she understood something Camilla never could. True love doesn't seek to control or isolate. It seeks to nurture and protect. Her last goodbye would come someday, but not yet. For now, she was exactly where she belonged, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, in the home they had all chosen together.